Perfect!
The existential dread of Super Mario 64.
It's me, Mario!
Super Mario 64 is the most terrifying game I have ever played.
What?
That's right. The bright and colorful world of Mario's first foray into the third dimension instilled more fear in me than any other video game experience I have ever had, despite the fact that it was not intended to be scary. For the most part. And also, despite the fact that it was rated E for everyone, or rather, K through A, as it was known in those days, none of those Resident Evils or Silent Hills of the time could give me nightmares the way Mario 64 did. But how is this possible? Or rather, why?
Why? Why? Why?
Well, to start, it is important to remember that for most kids growing up in the 90s, Mario 64 was their first true 3D gaming experience. And so it was for yours truly. I was about 10 years old at the time, still young enough to have that fleeting, overactive imagination that kids that age are still capable of. And so, when I first played Mario 64 in all of its glorious three-dimensional majesty, it felt real. Yes, the graphics of the original appear primitive and blocky by today's standards, but at the time, that 10-year-old imagination of mine compensated for the now dated graphics and turned the entire experience into one I felt I was actually living at the time. Perhaps I'm the only kid that felt such a deep connection to this game. Maybe others acknowledged it as the mindless fantasy that it was, but it was this simulation-like connection for me that made Mario 64 so damn scary. Now, you might be thinking, excuse me, sir, there's nothing scary about any Mario game. After all, it's meant to appeal to children and has little to no violence. More on that in a moment. And I would agree that most of the game is a harmless, fun romp throughout. However, when Super Mario 64 was scary, it was very scary. Sometimes in ways unintentional. And it was those scary moments that really stuck with me the most. Let us go through those moments together, shall we? Exhibit 1. Peach's Castle. Mario 64 was a real trailblazer in terms of the 3D platformer game. The idea of exploring a massive, overworld environment, which in turn provides access to each individual playable world inside. It might seem cliché and antiquated by today's standards, but Mario 64 was among the first to do it, and the first to do it right. And it did it so well, practically perfecting the formula. That is until Banjo-Kazooie came along, but I digress. The vehicle for Mario 64's overworld is Peach's Castle. You initially start the game in the outside the castle area, which I will refer to as the front yard. At first glance, nothing seems scary about Peach's Castle or the front yard. But if you were like me, and you felt like you were actually living inside the environment of the game, it is an existential nightmare. A feeling of loneliness permeates the entire thing. Not a single living soul can be found anywhere outside the castle. You can't even hear that signature Peach's Castle music outside of the castle. Just the serene, haunting sound of birds chirping forever and ever and ever. The loneliness, the silence, the infinite seclusion, the massive scale of it all. It's daunting. And that's just the front yard area. Within the castle walls, more terror awaits. The basement area in general, with its flooded flooring, that menacing image of the Lethal Lava Land painting, an entire room dedicated to Hazy Maze Cave with its Terminator 2-like liquid metal entrance, and of course, there's... I also remember being startled the first time I ran towards that painting of Peach on the first floor, watching it slowly transform into an image of Bowser, with the floor suddenly giving way beneath you and forcing you into the first Bowser stage. A bona fide jump scare in a Mario game. Look, I was 10 years old, I was highly susceptible to fear. Everything scared me at the time. Exhibit 2. The Death of Mario. Here are some examples of what it looks like when Mario dies in his earlier 2D outings. Now, let's take a look at how the death of Mario evolved in Super Mario 64. Good God, man! The 2D deaths were essentially harmless. A funky jingle plays while Mario does the scream pose. It's quick and to the point, and before you know it, you're back in the game and ready to try again. The Mario 64 deaths, by comparison, are just downright sadistic. These are longer, much more graphically detailed animations designed to make you feel really, really bad that you just killed Mario. All followed by that signature Bowser wipe, where the game was literally laughing at your sorrow. Like, do we really need to see the beloved Super Mario clutch his throat and desperately grasp for air as water begins to fill his lungs, people? Or how about watching everyone's favorite plumber get eaten alive by a gigantic fish? And when you do die, you are literally hurled out of the world like Jazzy Jeff from Fresh Prince style. Remember earlier when I said the game was meant to appeal to children and has little to no violence? I lied. I mean, yeah, it was meant to appeal to kids, but Jesus, if this is not considered violent, I do not know what is. Exhibit 3. Jolly Roger Bay. The first two worlds in Mario 64 are what you would expect from a Mario game. Bright and colorful, recognizable enemies, relatively simple challenges, nothing scary to see here. Then you get to Course 3, Jolly Roger Bay, and that is when the frightening potential of Mario 64 starts to reveal itself. From the get-go, this world tasks you with the challenge of entering a sunken ship to get to the Power Star inside. What's with this sunken ship? Who did it belong to? Why is it at the bottom of the ocean? How long has it been there? What is the history behind this thing? Whatever. It's just a stupid ship, right? I mean, let's just go in there, grab the star, and bada bing, bada boom. Oh my god. Okay, so to enter the sunken ship, you have to go in through the window, which is being occupied by this fucking thing. I cannot stress enough how startling this was the first time I experienced it. When you first start your dive towards the sunken ship, you can sort of make out the weird purple thing sticking out of that window, and you're like, what is that? You approach closer and closer until you start to make out the weird purple thing is actually a creature's head, with some gnarly teeth to boot, all the while keeping an eye on your health meter as it slowly deteriorates. Then you're like, okay, let me see what happens if I just try to get closer to this purple head thing and maybe die! What the hell? Oh crap, now I'm really low on health and almost out of air. Need to swim to the surface, go, 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 go! the damage from that unexpected hit led to Mario drowning before my eyes before I can reach the surface for air. Man, that really stuck with me. It doesn't get much better when you do it right, either. Now, the eel has completely come out of the sunken ship, and you can finally see the whole thing in all of its, glory. By the standards of the time, the scale of this monster was massive. Watching it eerily writhe around that spooky-looking sunken ship made swimming down into that open window a truly intimidating prospect. And what awaited me inside, you ask?
Mamma mia!
Oh my. Exhibit 4. Nessie. Nessie, the swimming beast in the cavern. An obvious reference to the famed Loch Ness monster, the Nintendo 64 graphics were not kind to poor old Nessie. Like, look at that face. Is it supposed to be smiling? That is the smile of a tortured soul if I've ever seen one. Like, please kill me! In order to get the star, you have to make it to Nessie's head. This is done by performing a ground pound on Nessie's back. You can actually hear the poor thing yelp in pain when you do so. And subsequently sink its head in defeat. This awful, violent act allows you access to the head. You can now control which direction Nessie moves in based on where Mario is facing. So not only do you break this poor thing's back with the force of Mario's ass, but after that you gain the ability to control its mind. Yikes. All this just so Mario can grab a star and then bounce like, fuck you, you're just a means to an end, peace! Exhibit 5. Big Boo's Haunt. The scariest world in Mario 64, in my opinion, one of the scariest environments in video game history, period. This is the one world in Mario 64 that I think was actually intended to be scary. That makes perfect sense and I have no issue with that. The Boo world of any Mario game should be spooky. But like, you know, cartoony spooky. The problem with Big Boo's Haunt is that Nintendo overshot the mark by about 1,000,000 miles when it comes to making it scary. The huge mansion directly in front of you with that epic scale again just looks uninviting. The background is equally frightening with its drab, moonlit color palette and the silhouettes of dead, branching trees making it look like the house is completely surrounded by a haunted forest. A huge, unnervingly bright full moon accentuating the spookiness of it all. All of these images are made complete by the music. Outside the haunted house, it's like this constant, super chilly wind sound. Nintendo really nailed the sound of chilly wind with this one. You can tell it just sounds cold. And that sound is layered on top of this zombie-like Gregorian chant that's like robotic sounding due to the sound card limitations of the N64 and just gloomy as all hell, combined with some high-pitched trembling xylophone keys to really make the whole thing just sound like nightmare. Inside the mansion, I think most would agree that the music in the merry-go-round room is just flat out unpleasant. Slightly off-key, carnival-like accordion music from hell? It basically sounds like the descent into pure madness. Welcome to hell, you're gonna burn in there. And if only it was the music that was scary in Big Boo's Haunt, this world has some of the scariest looking enemies in the game. Of particular note in the scary enemies department, the first is the Giant Eye. Getting to the Giant Eye requires you to go through a wall using the invisible cap. So you don't actually see the eye until you get really up close and personal with it. Like as soon as you go through that wall, there's just this gigantic, unblinking eye staring you right in the face. A startling experience the first time I played it, to be sure. But nothing compares to my final example of sheer horror in Mario 64. Anyone that has even a vague familiarity with Mario 64 knows exactly what I'm talking about already. Just watch. Like, really, Nintendo? I was already scared to death and on edge with the entire vibe of this world to begin with. The way it looks, the way it sounds, I was already anxious and uncomfortable. You had me at the chilly wind sound. I legitimately did not see the piano attack coming at all the first time I played it, which made it another honest-to-God jump scare. 2 jump scares, if we're counting now, in a Mario game. Please, just let that sink in for a moment. So, yeah. In my opinion, Super Mario 64 is the scariest game of all time, both when it was intended to be scary, a la Big Boo's Haunt, and when it wasn't intentional. Nessie, you freak of nature, I'm looking in your direction. But hey, maybe that's just me. Maybe I was just a huge wimp as a kid, a big scaredy cat, if you please. Most people probably played through the game without issue, not scared of any of it, delighted by the whimsy of it all. But everyone, and I do mean everyone, was scared of that damn piano.